Okay, let's dive right into this. Because look, if you've been glancing at the news lately, you'd probably think the world is on the absolute brink of a total diplomatic meltdown, right? The headlines are screaming that talks between the US and Iran have completely collapsed. But today, in this explainer, we are going to cut through all of that noise. We're going to look past the dramatic public theater, dig into the actual data and the real reports, and reveal why a historic agreement is actually closer than ever.
So to understand exactly where we are right now, we have to start with this incredibly vivid scene from late last week. Just picture this: a room at the Serena Hotel in Islamabad. A triangular table was set up. 3 edges, 3 chairs, 3 flags, representing the Americans, the Iranians, and the Pakistanis. Field Marshal Asim Munir had even personally inspected this table. It was totally prepped for a historic signature that could finally end a brutal 2-month conflict and a crippling naval blockade. But the American delegation never arrived. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, grounded, literally just hours before their flights. The flags were neatly packed away, and 2 C-17 Globemasters were actually seen flying American security equipment straight out of a Pakistani airbase. The table was literally folded up,
and let me tell you, the global reaction to that folded table was absolute panic. The headlines instantly declared Islamabad process collapses, and the markets, they reacted immediately. Goldman Sachs revised their Brent crude estimates upward to $90 a barrel. Then, oil quickly shot up to $108. And global shipping, passage through the absolutely crucial Strait of Hormuz, completely collapsed to just 5% of its pre-war levels. The whole world looked at this and basically saw a total disaster. Adding to this whole image of failure was the seemingly chaotic, super sudden movement of the Iranian delegation. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araqi and his team were quietly moved out of their hotel overnight. So first, they're in Islamabad on Thursday. Then, suddenly they're in Muscat on Friday. And by Monday, they were sitting in the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Library in St. Petersburg just waiting for Putin. It totally looks like a massive pivot away from peace, doesn't it? But stick with me, because I'm going to show you why what we're actually seeing here is just a mirage. Now, what's really interesting about this is Layer 1, Iran's unprecedented offer.
See, ever since February, Iran has insisted on solving everything at once, meaning everything is solved at the same time or absolutely nothing is solved at all. But recently, they made a seismic shift to a sequenced approach. Let's break down exactly what that sequenced offer looks like, as reported by Axios and actually confirmed by multiple outlets. It's an open-for-open formula. Step 1, peace and maritime access. Basically, Iran unconditionally reopens the Strait of Hormuz if the U.S. lifts its naval blockade of Iranian ports and ends hostilities. Step 2, pursue nuclear negotiations later on. This is absolutely massive because it perfectly mirrors the exact recommendation made by Max Boot at the Council on Foreign Relations just last month. The strategy is literally peace and maritime access first, uranium later. They are actually aligning here.
Which brings us to Layer 2, mutual economic pain. The reality is both sides are inflicting massive pain on each other, and both sides know this simply cannot continue indefinitely. Their interests are aligning out of sheer undeniable necessity. Let's look at the actual numbers driving this. $270 billion. That is the staggering estimated figure of Iran's war damages. To put that into perspective, this number represents a completely crippling blow to their infrastructure and economy. Iran desperately needs to sell oil to fund national reconstruction. They literally cannot afford for this blockade to continue if they want to rebuild their country. But then, contrast that massive figure with this number, $4.11. That's the U.S. gas price per gallon right now. While Iran desperately needs to rebuild, the American administration desperately needs to lower costs. With the November midterm elections looming right around the corner, the current U.S. leadership knows that high fuel prices are a massive, massive political liability. So, you see, both nations are under intense economic pressure to make a deal happen. So, the crucial point here is summarized perfectly by this assessment from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They note that Iran believes, and I quote, with some justification, that it can absorb greater economic and military pressure than the United States. Former President Trump might publicly state that he holds all the cards, but as these think tanks point out, he definitely holds less time. Iran has patience, but the American public, they are not going to tolerate 6 more months of $4+ gasoline. The clock is ticking super loudly for Washington. Now let's look at Layer 3, the secret language. To truly understand the current situation, we have to listen very closely to the diplomacy happening behind closed doors. Publicly, sure, we get these theatrical dismissals like this one from Donald Trump, who told Fox News, "Why fly 18 hours just for small talk?" It's a classic, very public walkaway. It feeds the narrative that the U.S. is just folding up the table and rejecting Iran's offer outright. It makes it look like a complete breakdown. But instantly juxtapose Trump's rhetoric with this incredibly subtle diplomatic tell from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He actually said, "This proposal is better than what we expected them to put forward." Guys, this is massive. The most hawkish Iran critic in the entire administration isn't rejecting the offer. He's signaling that it's a foundation for negotiation. It's a solid starting point that they can actually build upon. And the back channels confirm this entirely. CNN reported that the gaps are simply not as wide as those screaming headlines suggest. Back channel communications are proceeding at full intensity right now. Most importantly, the architecture of a phased agreement is actively emerging. This just confirms that the max boot formula, Hormuz first, nuclear later, is secretly moving forward. The pieces are all right there, sitting neatly on the board. So that brings us to the art of public theater. Think about it. If the pieces are there, and the deal is actively being negotiated in the back channels, why fold that triangular table in Islamabad? Why go through the very public art of storming out? This brilliantly illustrates the Trump diplomatic playbook. Just look at the immense domestic pressure the president faces right now. His MAGA base is highly critical of foreign entanglement. Massive commentators like Tucker Carlson are loudly declaring this isn't America's fight. And you've got 237 members of Congress demanding legal authorization before any further action is taken. Because of all this, he cannot just walk up to a table and sign a deal. He has to perform the public action of walking away and rejecting the talks to satisfy domestic pressures, while the private reality is that back channels proceed to make the other side come to terms. The drama is the product, but the deal remains the absolute destination. And behind the scenes, the trusted facilitators are still hard at work. Look at Pakistan's absolutely critical role here. The Iranian ambassador stated very clearly, "We will negotiate in Pakistan and nowhere else because we trust Pakistan." Arakchi visited Islamabad twice in 2 days, so shuttle diplomacy hasn't stopped at all. Going forward, the physical venue might shift. It could be a phone call, it could be Muscat, or even Moscow for storing uranium, which is a tactical move the German chancellor openly praised, by the way. But the underlying negotiations facilitated by these trusted third parties, they are very much alive. Which leads us to why necessity always wins. When we zoom out to the broader global picture, we can see exactly why this conflict's ending is structurally predetermined. Let's move to this and see how it builds the case for inevitability. Look at these global dependencies. President Trump desperately needs a foreign policy win and peace. Iran needs to rescue a completely battered economy. Pakistan needs the diplomatic credit of being a regional stabilizer. The Gulf states absolutely need their maritime supply chains reopened, like yesterday. And globally, Europe needs gas, India needs oil, and China needs trade. What you really should take away from all this is that this isn't just about two nations arguing at a table. This is about global systemic survival. So I pose this question to you. In the war between drama and necessity, which one is going to win? When you're scrolling through social media, it's so easy to expect bombs to fall and negotiations to permanently fail, mostly because that's exactly what drives clicks. But the reality of global politics dictates that when an entire global market literally cannot afford to collapse, necessity always defeats drama. And that leaves us with this final, incredibly powerful thought. The bazaar is open. The haggling you're seeing right now is fierce. The public posturing, the folded tables, the dramatic canceled flights, it's all theatrics in full display. But underneath it all, an inevitable deal is right there on the horizon. The real question isn't if a deal will be struck, but rather, when the curtain finally falls on this diplomatic theater, who is going to walk away having gotten the absolute best price? Keep watching the headlines, but now you know exactly how to read between the lines.